Hi, welcome back to Christine's Home Affairs. After watching some of my sew to sell videos, I've had a viewer request a tutorial on how to make these bags. These ones are made with sample swatch fabric and they've got one piece on the front. They've got one piece on the front here, and then this brown section here is another piece of fabric which has been cut in half with a third piece on the back. And she's asked how to do this bag. So what we're going to do today is a batch sewing tutorial. I'll show you how to make these style bags and also how I go about processing sample swatch fabrics. These are all upholstery fabrics, but you can do these bags with your regular quilting cotton or any other woven fabric as well. Just because I use a lot of upholstery fabric doesn't mean you have to worry about using that as well. Stick around and I'll show you from start to finish how I go about making these bags. I'll do the tutorial and we'll do a time trial as well, and we'll work out the costings for it later. So if you have a look at these bags here, I've got one swatch there, another there. They're offset from the front to the back, and I've used that same colour on the side edges. And I'm thinking that these fabric samples here are around about the right size. And there's a bit of a fold over on the other side, so I might be able to get as much out of that as possible. I want to have 2 prints and a solid in each bag. And it looks like this one is going to work out really well. So I've got a back, the side and a front, back, side and a front, and these are working out to be in the correct order and the right amount of samples as well. I do have lots of extras if I ever need them. So what I'm going to do now is take these straight to the heat press, place them right side down. I'll put some baking paper in between the bottom section and the top section, and then I'm going to start heating or pressing this cotton fabric that's on the back here. The heat of the heat press will release the glue and I'll be able to just peel that off. I'm hoping it will also remove a lot of the glue that I've got on the sides of the swatches as well. These ones are quite easy to remove, but I do have to go through the process and remove all of the papers, or as much as I can, and the backing sheet. I've put the timer on, so I've already been going for 3 minutes by the time I've started setting up, and I'll just keep that running until I finish the whole job. You can use an iron or the heat press. I've only had my heat press for a very short time, but I found this has been absolutely fantastic for removing the glue. But an iron will work as well. It just doesn't get as hot as what the heat press does. To protect the surface of my mat, I've placed a sheet of baking paper underneath. I'm just waiting for my heat press to get up to a decent temperature. I have no idea what temperature is ideal, so I'm just going to let it go up to the factory setting. In the meantime, I'll lay my fabric out face down, and I'll place a sheet of baking paper or a Teflon sheet over the top of that. And once I think that that's ready, I can put the drawer in and let it press. I've set mine so that it's on auto press. That way the platen will go down automatically by itself. I did do a video review on it a few weeks ago. I actually use this for interfacings and stabilizers. It's been brilliant. The piece that's already been removed, I'll fold that in half and then fold it over itself. That way I won't get any extra glue on areas that I don't want it. As I'm taking the paper off the heat press, I'll make sure I keep all the sample swatches in the same order that they were on the sheet. It'll make it a little bit easier for me to match up the colours, and I spend less time thinking about it. The whole process so far has taken me less than 5 minutes to remove the paper on the back of these. Now that I have the large sheet removed, I can start taking these papers off. And most of them, when they're older, the glue releases really quickly and it doesn't take much to separate the fabric and the paper. On the side bits, I do leave anything that's there. The edges have been overlocked or serged with a nylon thread and they're too difficult to get off. I'll decide later whether or not I want to trim them or if I'm just going to incorporate those into the seams. Quite often I'll just incorporate it into the seams. I've decided to take these straight over to the heat press. I'm going to blast them with some heat for just for 5 seconds, and I'll do them individually as well because whilst I've got one in there I can quickly pull the paper off while it's hot. So far it's taken me just over half an hour to peel off all the papers and get everything pressed nice and evenly. You'll see that there's still big chunks of paper at the top of some of them. These were just at the fold over on the fabric, and all I've done is press them open and tried to get rid of as much as I can, but I'm going to cut my fabric up to that line. That'll give me the most usable amount of fabric out of these swatches. So I'll find the one that's got the biggest sheet on it at the moment, take a measurement, and that's what size I'm going to cut all my swatches. So from the bottom of the paper here to the bottom edge here, I've got about 8 1/4 inches of usable fabric. I'm going to cut straight across the top there. Then I'll cut all of my fabric pieces so that they're 8 inches across this way. The other way I don't need to worry about. But if you're going to be making these bags with your own fabric, you'll be cutting 7 1/2 inches by 8 inches if you want to do the same type of bag. I'm going to be lazy and just use this square, which is just a fraction over 8 inches. I can use that to get the most out of my fabric. And if there's a little bit of paper left on there, it really doesn't matter. That'll be hidden away in the seam. So there's just a small amount of paper. I can either peel that off or just leave it. I'm placing the straight edge of the ruler along the top or bottom edge of the fabric to give me a straight side, and then I'm cutting as much as I can off on the right hand side, making sure that on the left hand side where the pinked edges are, I still have enough fabric to trim off. So I'll try and take off as much paper as I possibly can, making sure that I don't fall short on the other end. So far what I have are sample pieces that have been cut down to 8 inches by 7 1/2 inches. Now I'm going to take the solid fabric in each block of 3 and cut those in half. And again, to keep everything simple so I don't get confused, I'll set that one aside, take this one, cut it in half, double check that's 8 inches. I want to cut it at the 4-inch line. That will give me 2 pieces now, one for this side and one for this side. So this is how my bag is going to be assembled. I've got the front and the back. So I'll keep these fabric pieces together so that I know that they're going into one bag. Put that one aside, take the next piece, make sure I cut it in half from the 8-inch width. That'll give me 2 even pieces, and I'll just keep putting the layers together until I've cut it all out. Okay, now I have everything cut out that I want to, except for the lining, of course. But we're ready now to make the back and front of the bag, and from there we can determine what size we need for our lining. So far we have an 8-inch by 7 1/2 inch square for the front and back, and a 4-inch by 7 1/2 inch rectangle for each of the front and the back. What I'll do now is place them right sides together, and sometimes that's hard to determine, And sometimes you'll find your swatch samples aren't the same size all the way. I can trim off any excess later on. So rather than clipping everything, I'm just going to keep the piles together, and using this process I'll take it to the machine and chain stitch everything together. Chain stitching just means that you'll sew this side seam and then sew this side seam directly after the other one without cutting your threads off. Because all we're doing is joining two pieces of fabric and the seam won't ever be seen from the front, it's a great time to use up any old bobbins that you want to reclaim and any short reels of thread that you just want to finish up as well. Doesn't matter what colour you use in here, because we will top stitch this shortly. You'll back stitch at the beginning and the end. Don't worry about cutting your threads, just keep everything together. That'll also help you keep all your patterns together for each individual bag, and it'll save you loads of time. I'm going to be using 1/4 inch seam allowance for this entire project. Once you've sewn the two pieces of fabric together, keep all the pieces in the same order without cutting your threads in between the sections. And now we can go and top stitch. So open out your fabric. I like to top stitch to the side that's got the print on it. Because I'm using the one colour for all of the bags, my preferred side to top stitch on is the printed side of the fabric. I'm going to use a grey for all of my top stitching today. And the seam that's underneath is going to be pushed over toward the printed side. That way I can top stitch all of those layers down. We'll do a narrow 1/8 inch top stitch along the printed fabric. Again, we're just going to chain stitch. We don't need to trim off the thread each time we finish. We can now separate those seams just by snipping the threads in between. Remember to keep all your back and front sections together though. What we've done now is created some much more usable fabric pieces for our bags. So this is what we have now for one bag. I've got a front and a back. When I place them together, I'm going to have the plain colour on opposing sides and the zip at the top there. Now you'll see on some of the swatches the fabric hasn't quite lined up either. This is the time where I'm going to line up both layers of fabric, the back and front, and get some lining, and I'll cut out all the pieces to the size that I need. That way each individual bag will have its own individual lining, but I can do the job really quickly. For my lining, I'm using, I think this might have been some sheeting or a tablecloth. I've got enough layers of lining roughly cut for each of the bags, and soon we're going to know exactly what finished size of fabric we're going to have. I've got two pieces of lining fabric placed together, and I'm placing my bag front and back together, and I'm lining up the outside edges because we know that we've already got those nice and straight, and we've got some uneven edges along here, so we didn't need to worry about the 7.5 inch size earlier, because the fabric skews a little bit as you're sewing. There's some glue residue, sometimes that can push your fabric. I'll cut the side edges and then I'll cut the top and bottom. When I cut the top and bottom section now, I will use a marking on my ruler, so I get a straight edge on my ruler on one side or from the other side, and then I'll cut straight across that way. And I'm cutting off all the excess bits. So I've cut off that side edge there, made it nice and straight, turn that around, and I'll repeat that for this side, cutting off as little as I possibly can so that all the layers are the same size. Now we know what our fabric sizes are supposed to be. So what we have now are two pieces of finished fabric that are 11.5 inches by 7.5 inches for the back and front, and our lining piece is also 11.5 inches by 7.5 inches. So that's the finished size of the fabric pieces that we want for this particular project. If your sample swatches are a different size, it won't matter, you'll just make them according to the size that you've got. So we've started off with 8 inches by 7.5 for both sides, and then we've cut that in half at 4 inches. We now have 11.5 by 7.5 inches. And that means we want a zip that is about 9 inches in length, because we're going to put some tabs on here. I'll finish cutting up the rest of these. Now that my lining is cut out to the same size as my outer fabric, I'm ready to start processing the zips. What I've done here is cut out some continuous zipper tape at 9.5 inches, and I've just put the slider into the centre. I'll show you what to do with the regular zip as well. So if you're using a continuous zip, open it out a little way, take the curved edge, push it in onto one side, and then just push the slider on and sit that in the middle. If you don't have continuous zips and you want to use a regular zip, open up the slider and just pinch the edges together, grab some tape I've just placed some adhesive tape over the end of the zip there, and that will prevent the slider from going any further. We can now cut off those little metal teeth at the end there and put our tabs over the edge of the zip. We'll also cut off the other end here. So if you're using a regular zip, cut off the metal bits and tape the opening closed. If you're just making one bag, then to do the zipper tabs, you'll need to have 2 strips of fabric that are the width of the zip by about 3.5 inches. We want to have the right sides facing, so if this was the printed fabric, we would fold that together and pop that fold over the edge of your zip here, and then you'll sew across here. And you'll do the same thing on this side, fold the fabric over and sew that tab. Now I'm going to be inserting 6 zips, and I want to make the best use of my time. What I've got here is a 3.5 inch strip of fabric for my end tabs, and I'll fold that in half. So with my tab fabric folded in half, what I'll do is place my zip in between the layers, and I'll do that for all of them. Once I've done one side, I'll cut the fabric off, turn my zip around and repeat for the other side. Now what I'm going to do is take this to the machine and sew all the way down this side and all the way down that side, and then my zipper tabs are all enclosed. I'm going to sew all the way down one side, back stitching over the area where the zipper teeth are. Once I finish that side, I'll turn it around and do exactly the same thing. The zipper tabs are all in place, and I just need to cut them apart and then fold out the tabs. I'll trim the tabs on the sides to make sure they're the same width as the zip. Makes it easier when I'm putting the zips into the bags. Now, if you're going to be sewing to sell, this is where you'll put your labels on. So Rosie, if you're watching, put your labels on now. Determine whereabouts you want them. With these bags, I chose not to put the labels on the outside of my bag. I tried it on one of them and it didn't look right at all, so I've actually put my label on the inside. With these fabrics, because they're such a textured fabric, I'm actually going to put my labels on the outside. Most of my customers do actually prefer them on the outside. So find a spot to put them and go and insert them onto one side of your bag only. Labels are on. Now I'm ready to put the zips in place. This upholstery fabric seems to be a little bit on the soft side. So what I'm going to do is use double-sided tape to put my zips on. That'll help prevent any of the layers from shifting. Place the bumpy side face down and centre that evenly across the fabric. Then I'll put another strip of tape over the top of that and I can place my lining down. I'll do this for all of the bags on the front side before we take it to the machine and sew them all in place. Place the lining right side down, ready to go to the machine and be stitched in place. And I will leave the front and the back sections together again so that I don't go and get them mixed up. Alright, now we're ready to go and put one side of the zipper in place. While I'm at the machine, I'm going to top stitch the first side of the zips, making sure that I only do the top stitching in the area where the zipper tape is and not beyond the tabs. I'll make sure the lining is well away from the zipper area so that I can stitch down the lining and the front fabric in one go. Okay, the top stitching is done on one side and we now need to put our matching piece of fabric onto the other side. So I've still kept everything together. I'll take the back piece and I want to make sure that the narrow strips of fabric are actually on opposing sides. So the solid colour will be on opposite side and the bag will go together in that manner. Back to the double-sided tape. I'll run that over the top edge of the zipper tape. And then I'll place this piece over the top. Line up those side seams. And then I can turn that around and we'll do the same for the lining. And the lining over the top, and we'll repeat that for all of these bags. Then take it to the machine, sew them down the same way we did the other side, then we'll top stitch again. Let's now go back and finish up the zips. So we'll sew in the other side and then we'll open it out and top stitch. We no longer have to worry about making sure that we keep the back and front pieces together because they're no longer going to be separated from this point. Don't forget to do a back stitch at the beginning and the end. When you get to where the zip slider is, you'll need to remember to move that out of the way again so that you can continue on. Alright, I forgot to hit record on the camera whilst doing the top stitching. So the second side of the zip has been done and the other side of the top stitching has been done as well. So my lining is away from the zip and so is my main. I'm ready now to put the bag together. At this point, if you wanted to put some side tabs on so that you can perhaps have some loops or even something to hang on to, you can go and do that. But this project's taking long enough, so I'm not going to do that for these bags. I'll just keep it very simple. Take the two outer fabrics, place those right side together, line up the edge seams, I'm going to take this to the machine now and sew all the way around and leave an opening at the bottom in the lining of about 4 to 5 inches, and that'll help me turn everything through. Make sure also that your zip is open at this point. If you don't remember to open your zip, then you're not going to be able to turn the bags the right way around. So I'll go and do that now. I'm not going to bother clipping these together. I'll actually assemble them over at the machine. It saves me a little bit of time and I don't have to worry about clipping. So what we've got is the edges clipped together where the tabs are for the zip. And I'm going to triple stitch at this side and this side when I get to them. I'll back stitch on this side of the lining and here because that'll be the beginning and the end. And I'll just go right around. What I'll also do at the machine is, instead of having a straight corner or a boxed corner, I'm going to come around and curve the edges. If you've got a round tool, you can use the edge of a cup or a bowl and just make a small curve on all 4 corners of your fabric. And that will be your stitching line as you go around. We'll go and sew all the way around and use that drawn line as the edge of our fabric and sew within that. And that'll give us a nice curve. It means we don't need to box our corners or poke any corners out. So I like to start on the side where the zip is, and that way I can just do my triple stitch there and then come all the way around. For this one here, I'll move the clips as I'm going, but when I do the other bags, I'm just going to lay the fabric together, line up the side there where the tabs are, and when I get to the bottom corner, I'll just eyeball that curve that I want. Okay, all the bags are finished now. The only thing we have to do is trim the curves and turn everything the right way around, make sure it all looks right, and then we can close up the bottom of the bag. So I've just eyeballed the curve at the bottom. I'll just trim that close to the edge there, and I'll do the same on all the 4 corners. Let's have a look how they finished. Once I've turned them the right way round, I poke out all the curves, make them sit nice, and then I can close up the lining on the inside just by pinching the edges together and stitching straight across. It's easier to place the fold of the fabric straight underneath the presser foot, have that sitting on your fabric, then you can hold it taut whilst you manipulate the other end to get the edges folded under, and then you can just sew straight across. And 4 hours and 10 minutes later, we are all done. So I have 6 bags here with the solid colour going down one side and then again on the other side. So the colours look fantastic together. I do love working with swatch samples because they're so easy to put together. all the thinking had been done for me when the samples were put together on their cards. So 4 hours and 10 minutes, that included the time it's taken me to actually film all of this for you as well. So I could take off at least a half an hour for all of that. So I think about 3.5 hours to do the 6 bags. I had in my mind before I started that I wanted to try and sell these for $25 each. Now you know that I get the sample fabric for nothing, and the lining fabric on the inside is mostly for nothing as well. My policy is never to charge for something that I haven't paid for, and I stick to that. I know some people don't agree. They think I should be charging for my time processing, but as you could see from the beginning of the video, I've put the clock on and I've timed the amount of time it took me to remove the paper and the glue and cut the fabric to size, all of that sort of thing that's involved in processing these sample swatch fabrics. Sure, it takes me a little bit of time to go and collect the fabric, but when you get 200 sample boards at a time, I think that equates to pretty much nothing anyway. So, material that I've paid for is the zip slider and the zip, as well as my label. There's less than $1 worth of material in that, even at retail price. So I'm allowing $2. The 30 to 40 minutes or so that it takes me to process one whole bag works out to be about $26 with my $45 an hour labour rate. Now that's Australian dollars as well, so you can do the conversion wherever you are. I charge $45 an hour for everything I do, and then I work backwards and factor in how much I spend on material and how much time it's taken me to make the bag. I had in my head $25 when I started these, and that's what I'm going to stick with, even though at the rate that I normally charge, they've taken me a little bit longer. Had I done more bags, I've only done 6 at this time, had I done any more like when I did the 35 the other day, my productivity would have been much higher, and therefore I could churn out a lot more bags in less time and make even more for my hourly rate. But I'm happy with $25 per bag, more than covers my time. I'm generous with what I think I'm worth, and I shouldn't have any trouble selling these at that price as well. I intentionally left off the tabs on the end because that was going to be extra time. I felt like it was going to take me a little bit too long, so I've left those things off. Most people don't even know what they're for. And if you don't know what they're for, it's either for people to hold on to them when they're opening their zip, or if they want to put handles on their bags as well, or even a wristlet strap. So not everybody uses them, and they're generally happy to buy them just as they are. So 6 of them is what I've got. So for the viewer that's asked about the pattern for this bag, this is the same thing. The size, the width of the bag is exactly the same. If you want to have it longer, add an extra couple of inches. So if you'd like this size bag 2 inches longer, and you'll get the same size bag as this one here. All of my bags end up random sizes because I use what I've got available. I don't want to go and add any extra bits that aren't available to me. I try to keep everything as simple as possible when I'm working with these swatch fabrics. The only other thing I would have done differently in these bags is used a more generic lining. So the lining I've got in here is floral, but you can see I've got lots of geometric shapes on here. I think they would have been great for men as well, so they may not appreciate the floral linings inside there. So next time I'll be more mindful of that when I'm making these bags. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I shall catch you next time. Bye for now.